Noraly Schoenmaker is known by millions as a symbol of modern freedom, riding solo across more than 80 countries and documenting her journey on the Itchy Boots channel with over 3 million subscribers. With more than 190,000 kilometers traveled, her life from the outside looks like a dream that very few people dare to pursue. However,
the silence of the Dutch countryside is shattered not by a scream, but by the rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat of a single-cylinder engine. Noraly Schoenmaker sits on the edge of a bed that no longer feels like home, staring at a packed pannier that contains her entire life. Most see a woman of steel, a fearless explorer conquering the Karakoram and the Andes. But the lens doesn't capture the shadows in her eyes when the GoPro stops recording. It doesn't show the crushing weight of a woman who traded the safety of a stable career and the warmth of a traditional life for a nomad's existence, only to find that the faster she rides, the closer her demons follow. Why does a woman with the world at her feet feel like she is constantly running out of road? Behind the breathtaking vistas lies a soul fractured by a relentless pursuit of more, a haunting isolation that thrives in the middle of a crowd, and a hidden grief that even the highest mountain peaks cannot overlook. This isn't a travelogue, it is a psychological autopsy of a woman who chose the world over herself, only to realize the world is a very cold place to sleep. What happens when the engine finally stops, and the silence is all that's left? Noraly sits at a mahogany desk, the clicking of her mouse sounding like a countdown. She is a geochemist, a master of the Earth's secrets, yet she cannot decode the chemistry of her own discontent. To the world, she is the success story, a PhD, a career, a trajectory that points straight to a quiet retirement. But inside, there is a low-frequency hum of panic. Every morning, the mirror reflects a woman she doesn't recognize, a captive in a blazer. The psychological weight of the conventional is a suffocating blanket. She remembers her childhood, the feeling of looking at maps not as tools for work, but as escape routes. There is a specific kind of tragedy in being exactly where you are supposed to be and feeling like an intruder. She watches her colleagues discuss mortgages and pension plans, their voices echoing as if from the bottom of a well. The internal wound is deep, it is the fear of a life lived in a straight line. The decision isn't a whim, it's an amputation. She hacks away the parts of her life that provide warmth to find the core of who she is. As the last box leaves the house, the silence in the empty living room is deafening. She stands in the center of the room, her breath visible in the unheated air. She has no bed, no kitchen, no home. She is a geochemist who has just turned her own world into dust. She walks to the garage. There, under a dim bulb, sits the machine. It is a mass of metal and rubber, indifferent to her sacrifice. She touches the handlebars, her fingers trembling. The transition from Dr. Schoenmaker to Itchy Boots is a violent one. She isn't just leaving a job, she is killing a version of herself. As she swings her leg over the seat for the first time, the weight of the panniers feels like a burden rather than a kit. She pulls the helmet on, and the world is suddenly muffled. She turns the key. The dashboard lights up, a digital eye watching her. She realizes with a jolt of terror that she didn't sell her house to find herself. She sold it because she was terrified of what would happen if she stayed. And now, with no home to return to, the road is no longer a choice, it's a sentence. The air is thin, tasting of iron and ice. Noraly's lungs ache with every breath. This is the peak she dreamed of, the rise that her followers watch with envy from their living rooms. But the camera doesn't record the hours she spent shivering behind a rock, trying to stop her hands from shaking long enough to fix a chain. This is the hidden loneliness of the pioneer. Psychologically, she is in a state of sensory deprivation. For weeks, the only voice she has heard is her own, narrating to a lens. She begins to talk to the bike. She calls it Dano, or Alaska, or Himalayan, imbuingly the steel with a soul because the absence of human warmth is becoming a physical pain. She sees a nomadic family in the distance, a mother holding a child, and for a fleeting second, the origin pain of her choice flares up. She chose the horizon over the hearth. She is editing footage. On the screen, she is smiling, radiant, telling the world how beautiful the mountains are. In the tent, her face is gaunt, her eyes sunken. The dichotomy is a psychological fracture. She is building a legend of fearless Noraly, while the real Noraly is terrified of a simple infection or a broken bone. The pressure of the vlogger identity begins to override the human. She cannot be tired. She cannot be sad. The brand demands a hero. The cold seeps through the ground, into her bones. She realizes that the millions of people who follow her are light years away. If she disappeared into a ravine tonight, she would be a headline, not a person. The isolation isn't just physical, it's existential. She is a woman who has succeeded in becoming a ghost that moves. She closes the laptop, plunging the tent into absolute darkness. The sound of the wind against the canvas sounds like 1,000 whispering voices, questioning her sanity. She reaches out to touch the side of the tent, needing to feel a boundary, a limit. A sharp, metallic crack echoes from the darkness outside, the sound of her bike falling over in the wind. In the middle of a literal wasteland, thousands of miles from a mechanic, she realizes the machine that is her only lifeline has just failed her. The peak of fame is a gilded cage. Noraly stands in the center of a mob, her smile fixed and brittle. This is the peak fame stage where the psychological pressure becomes a physical weight. Every person sees her as a symbol of freedom, but she feels like a hunted animal. They want the stories, the inspiration, the bravery, but no one asks if she's had a decent meal or a full night's sleep in months. Her internal conflict is a silent scream. She has become a character in her own life. The long-form storytelling of her journey has turned into a performance. She feels the heavy, reflective guilt of knowing she is inspiring people to leave their lives, while she herself is secretly yearning for a door she can lock and a chair that doesn't vibrate. The downfall isn't a spectacular crash on a muddy track, it's the slow erosion of her identity. She sees the lines around her eyes, the permanent tan of a rider, and the hollow look of someone who has seen too much and felt too little. Then, a notification pings on her phone. A message from home. A family member is ill. The tragedy hits with the force of a head-on collision. The nomadic life offers the illusion of being untouchable, of being outside the flow of time. But the news from the Netherlands reminds her that while she was chasing sunsets, the people she loves were getting older, sicker, and lonelier without her. The guilt is a poison. She is on the other side of the planet, and her freedom now feels like a desertion. She realizes that her independence has a cost, and it's being paid by the people she left behind. She sits on the edge of the bed, that HBO-style dramatization of her life turning into a tragedy. She looks at her riding boots, caked in the dust of 3 continents. They look like lead. She can't go back, and she's not sure she can go forward. A phone call comes through. It's her agent, talking about a major sponsorship deal, a new bike, a new continent. As the voice drones on about numbers and engagement, Noraly looks at a bottle of water on the nightstand and realizes her hand is shaking so violently she can't pick it up. The fearless traveler is breaking in real time. The movement has stopped. For a woman whose entire identity is built on boots and itchy feet, the stillness is a torture chamber. This is the deep darkness phase. Without the roar of the engine to drown out her thoughts, the psychological haunting begins. The silence of the room is filled with the ghosts of every mistake, every missed birthday, every person she pushed away to keep riding. She experiences a loss of purpose. If she isn't moving, who is she? Just a middle-aged woman in a foreign land with a broken bike and a dusty helmet. The internal pressure to be the adventurer becomes a mocking voice in her head. She scrolls through her old videos, the woman on the screen seems like a stranger, a vibrant, happy lie. She realizes she has become addicted to the high of the road to avoid the low of her own soul. She reflects on the nature of her journey. Is it exploration, or is it a flight? The guilt and isolation are no longer external factors, they are her only companions. She thinks about the real world she fled. By now, her old colleagues have families, gardens, a sense of belonging. She has a YouTube channel and a collection of scars. The tragedy of Noraly isn't that she failed, but that she succeeded so well she became a nomad who can no longer find the way home. The road has changed her brain chemistry, the peace of a normal life would now feel like a prison. She is stuck in a liminal space, too wild for the city, too tired for the wilderness. She contemplates the legacy she is leaving. Will people remember her, or just the bike? She walks out to the courtyard and pulls the tarp off the bike. The metal is cold. She rests her forehead against the fuel tank. "What are we doing?" she whispers. The bike doesn't answer. She reaches for the ignition, but her fingers stop. She realizes that for the first time in years, she is genuinely afraid to start the engine. Because if she starts it, she has to go somewhere, and she has finally realized there is nowhere left to hide. The rebirth doesn't come with a fanfare. It comes with a choice. Noraly stands by her bike, looking out at the nothingness. She has survived the darkness of the previous months. She hasn't healed in the traditional sense, she has simply integrated the pain. The psychological depth of her character now includes the acceptance of her own fragility. She is no longer trying to be the fearless Noraly. She is just Noraly. She realizes that her purpose isn't to be a traveler, but to be a witness. To show the world that you can be broken and still move. That you can be lonely and still be whole. This is the emotional reflection of her legacy. She isn't a biker, she is a cartographer of the human spirit. The tragedy of her heartbreak, the loss of a normal life, is the very thing that allowed her to find a life that is extraordinary. The comeback is quiet. She starts the engine. The sound is no longer a heartbeat of panic, but a steady, grounding hum. She rides slowly at first, feeling the tires grip the salt. She isn't running away anymore. Every mile she covers now is a mile she owns. The long-form storytelling of her life has reached a chapter of grace. She passes a small village, and instead of just filming, she stops. She shares a cup of tea. She doesn't pull out the camera. She exists in the moment, not for the content, but for the connection. The tragedy has been transmuted into a profound kind of wisdom. She knows now that home isn't a place with a mortgage, it's the space between her and the horizon. The sun begins to set, turning the salt flats into a mirror of gold. Noraly rides into the light, a silhouette of resilience. The HBO-style score swells, a cello melody that is both melancholic and triumphant. She is a woman who lost everything to find the world, and in the end, found herself. As the screen fades to black, we hear the sound of her voice over the wind, whispering a single, haunting question: what if the road never ends?